What do the rabbis, Donald Trump, and the Third Temple have in common? Well, here to discuss that question that I just asked is author, lecturer, and Christian expositor Tom Horn. Tom, it's great to have you in studio here at Prophecy Watchers.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's great to be back. I always love coming down, hanging out with you and Bob.
Old home week. And you have brought us a book. And by the way, I almost spoke the title of the book in the opening, The Rabbis, Donald Trump, and the Third Temple. People who are watching are seeing some very interesting things. And of course, you're one of the people who are watching.
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, I was cognizant of the fact that since the election of Donald Trump in 2016, you had rabbis who saw him as this Cyrus-like figure. And of course, Cyrus, 500 years or so before Christ, was the ancient Persian king that helped liberate Israel and then contributed to the building of the temple, according to the prophecies of Isaiah 200 or so years in advance. And so when you compare a person to, an icon like the Persian King Cyrus, who is best known among, the Hebrews and among Israel and Judeo-Christianity as that guy that helped them build the temple again after the Babylonians had destroyed it. In Israel, when you use words and when you compare people to something, it means something. They're saying something. They're kind of inferring something on that political leader. And so I saw all of this happening, but here's why I wrote this book. It really wasn't on my radar at all. A little over a year ago, a member of the President's Faith Council reached out to me, sent me an email. It's a guy that I happen to know, and he said, I want to talk to you on the phone, but you have to guarantee me anonymity. He said, in the position that I'm in, nobody can know that I was the guy talking about this. So I said, sure, what is it? Sounds like a bombshell or something, right? We talked on the phone, and he said, you need to know that a meeting took place here in Washington, D.C., and there were two of the senior rabbis from Israel, Orthodox rabbis from Israel, that came over. They had a sit-down meeting with Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, and a couple of other of the members of the Faith Council were in that meeting. Bottom line is he told me quite a bit of stuff which has since started rolling out, coming out in the news, which has confirmed to me that he knew what he was talking about, right? But the big bombshell was these rabbis are in the ear of Donald Trump and Jared Kushner specifically to let Trump know that he won the election against all odds because God led him to that point so that he would be an agent, a King Cyrus-like agent, to secondly, not only be a friend to Israel, but ultimately, when the time is right, to speak in favor of the building of the Third Temple, to help the whole idea behind that get wind under its wings. Well, this is just explosive information, right?
It is.
And of course, I had a lot of questions. What was Trump's reaction to that? Is Jared Kushner playing a role? And he gave me some other bits of information that have come out in the news since. And one of the other big parts of this, which I didn't see coming, he said part of the conversation in Donald Trump's peace plan, which, as you know, is getting ready to come out, like in June, part of his peace plan will involve helping Saudi Arabia wrest control of the holy sites in Israel, including the Temple Mount, from either completely away from the Jordanians and the Waqf, or at least some level of dominance over controlling what happens on those, and that will be like a step one, because the Saudis, they're all about making money. They're secular. They're not like the Islamic radicals that are always throwing a fit on the Temple Mount if a Jew wants to go there or a Christian wants to go there and pray. They're way more open to this idea. So I received all that information, actually wrote about it, by the way, in the book. And so people will read in the book stuff that is dated before it has just in recent weeks actually came out in the news that the Jordanians inviting the Palestinians to join them in control over the Temple Mount. Of course, now they're all in a big fight. And so that, that may not work out as well as they hoped it would, but specifically because they had got leaked information from Donald Trump's peace plan talking about turning control of the Temple Mount over to Saudi Arabia. And so there was a great deal of information that he gave me there. In fact, he said that Jared was spending quite a bit of time nurturing a relationship with the Crown Prince, Salman. And within maybe 2 months, 3 months, I wrote about it in the book. After that, here comes the Crown Prince, and he starts speaking publicly in favor of Israel having a right to their own land and to be a nation state. Then he meets with a group of evangelical Christians, and he starts talking about how Saudi Arabia wants to be more open now to the whole interfaith kind of movement and respectful of where Christians. So some of the stuff he had told me privately starts rolling out in the news, and I'm like, okay, this guy was really giving me the skinny on what was happening here. Of course, in the book, where I really take off is I use that as a jumping off point to talk about the building of the third temple, and will it happen, who's pushing for it, and so on.
Christians have been talking about the third temple ever since I've been studying Christianity. I mean, going back to 1948. And then, in particular, 1967, 68, you had the war, and you had the Israeli troops standing on the Temple Mount and declaring, "This is the day. We have taken it back." And of course, they didn't, and they deemed it not to be the time, and it probably wasn't. God's timing is everything, but that started Christians talking about what must soon happen, and they would go back to Daniel chapter 9 and the days of prophecy leading up to the building of the third temple. And guess who builds it? The Antichrist. And so Christians have watched this, and there's been some division on how they interpret Daniel and what's really going to happen there. But you, I think, in your book, have got your finger on what is actually happening now. In other words, the reality of the situation.
Well, I had great trainers, of course, all the way through the time when I was a pastor, and then friends like you and Terry James and other people who are really more experts kind of on these end time events, even more so than I am. But you said something a moment ago that is interesting. You mentioned the 6-Day War, 1967. Of course, they pushed the Arabs back and threatened to actually invade, their own country. But what rang out among the Israeli soldiers was the Temple Mount is in our hands. That's that famous line, right?
Right.
And did you notice recently, after Donald Trump announced that the American position is that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel. That's very important that he made that statement. And then he ordered that our embassy be moved there. And right thereafter, Netanyahu got up, and he too, not just the rabbis, he referred to Donald Trump as fulfilling prophecy and playing a prophetic role. And during that great speech, he said, Donald Trump has recognized Jerusalem, blah, blah, blah. And he said, the Temple Mount is in our hands. Now, he said that in that famous statement. You can watch it on YouTube. But that was definitely sending a signal that he, too, is aware of this movement towards the construction of a third temple. In fact, I've been told that privately, and I'll bet research would show this to be true, that Netanyahu's actually privately been funding some of the push through the rabbis around this conversation of building a third temple. But he certainly extended a commentary there that resonates with all Orthodox Jews about the Temple Mount.
Now, I want to say something at this point. Tom's book, The Rabbis, Donald Trump, The Third Temple, has a little small print subhead here, which interests me a great deal. It says, and the top secret plan to build the third temple. And that's what the book's all about, really, the top secret plan. Everybody loves a mystery. They love a secret.
Right.
They love to dig in, get behind the story, and you've done that here.
Yeah, the first few chapters in this book really sets that up. You know, when you say the top secret plan, what are you talking about? Who are the players? Who are the people that are working behind the scenes? And we do name some names in there. Now, you know, people watching this program, some might say, well, why would we connect the arrival of Antichrist? You said a moment ago the third temple will be built by the Antichrist. Whether it's built by him, promoted by him, or he's simply the guy that comes along around the same time that it's built and defiles it, it is part of prophecy. Daniel chapter 9, which you mentioned, talks about the abomination of desolation.
Right.
Jesus, in Matthew 24, actually quotes Daniel, and he says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place. Well, the holy place, that's key language to the Jews. There was only one holy place. That was the temple, right? And then, of course, Apostle Paul to the church in Thessalonica says that the Antichrist will stand in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So there's only one way that could happen. You have to have the building of a third temple.
And what's fascinating about the Antichrist standing up and declaring that he is God, if you look at the Greek language of that Paul wrote to the Thessalonican church, it says, he shall stand up in the holiest of holies and declare that he is God. The Greek word is naos, which doesn't mean just the temple itself. It means the holy place. And so there's something going on here that is really deep and dark, and you're kind of probing to try to find out the story behind the story.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, and I'm glad you said that, because you got me to thinking something I had never thought about before. When it says that, you know, the abomination that maketh desolate, I mean, there's something there,
right?
That means he has defiled this holy place. And of course, the Holy of Holies, this was the place that only the high priest could enter into, right? A rope tied around his leg with little bells on it in case he offends God and God kills him and they have to drag him out with a rope, right?
Right.
So this was a place to be entered into only with the most deepest level of religious respect. So if the Antichrist literally enters into the Holy of Holies, he is literally defiling God, right?
Yeah.
He is defiling God.
Defiling God, but this leads us into several questions which are fascinating. For example, where is the holy place? Nobody even knows for sure right now. The big discussion going on with the people who want to build the temple in Israel is, some of us think we know where the temple was actually situated.
Right.
We're keeping very quiet about it. We don't want to start a political firestorm. Other people say, well, we're not really sure. We have to get in there and do some measuring and some surveying to actually put the holy place where the holy place was. And all of this is politically very delicate, because you have the wonderful Dome of the Rock standing there. And people are whispering and saying, that's where it was.
Right.
That's where it was.
Right.
Well, you can't say that too loud.
Right. Well, I know, you know, our mutual friend, Dr. Randall Price, some of the leading experts in Israel among the Hebrew scholars, the historians, have said, you know, that very same thing, that it appears that the Holy of Holies is directly beneath the Dome of the Rock. There's also been excavations underneath the Temple Mount. And some rabbis, whether this is true or not, I don't know, have hinted that that is also where the Ark of the Covenant, the ancient Ark of the Covenant, is there. Some of them have said that, you know, I said recently, the one thing that would truly compel the building of the third temple would be the discovery or the disclosure, if it's already been discovered, of the Ark of the Covenant. If it was presented, I think it'd put pressure on the whole world. And I think you'd have, again, interfaith, all the Abrahamic faiths, even among the Muslim scholars, you would have people pushing for the building of a third temple. Why? Because nobody's going to tolerate the Ark of the Covenant being placed in a museum for gawkers to walk by and look at, right? It's just not going to happen unless you want boils and blains to break out on your skin, right? All your Dagon gods to start falling over. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So it would really put, I think, a universal push, including probably even members of the United Nations who are very anti-Israel, for the construction of a third temple, because there's only one place where the ark should be kept, and that's inside the Holy of Holies. Now, people should know, though, that at the time of Christ, the ark was not in the Holy of Holies. As far as they knew, it was lost to history at that time. So you don't have to have the ark to build the third temple.
Right.
But I think a great discovery of some of those lost treasures that Jeremiah buried right somewhere.
Oh,
yeah.
Everybody's looking, and we've heard from 2 or 3 sources, just to add a little interest to the conversation, that the Jerusalem Temple Institute, the Sanhedrin, say at this point now that they know where the ark is,
right,
and it's just a matter of waiting for the right time to pull it out, which is fascinating.
And what they're extending is the time is now because of Donald Trump. That if Donald Trump, again, this private meeting in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump was told, and by the way, I think one of the people that was there was a member of the Sanhedrin, and I'll tell you why I think that in a moment, because I was told almost verbatim that what this one Orthodox rabbi said was that Donald Trump had initiated a prophetic process, and that when the time was right, it would lead to the building of the third temple. And furthermore, they told Donald Trump, you were only elected because you have this opportunity to do the things like Cyrus did.
Right.
And but the success of your presidency and 2020 will depend on whether you will speak in favor of the construction of the third temple. So they were putting a lot of pressure on him. Now, I believe, and it's just a theory, I'm not sure if they presented this coin to Donald Trump in that meeting, but this coin was out around the time of that meeting. And it's, it's sanctioned by the Sanhedrin. It shows Donald Trump and ancient Cyrus on the front, but then on the back of it, it shows the third temple.
Mm-hmm. It
and
does.
So the message is very clear, right? That what they expect from Donald Trump. Then, some months later, they issued a second coin, a gold one, which basically has all the same imagery. It's got the third temple on it. On the front, it's got Donald Trump and Cyrus. It's also got the golden menorah and some of the other temple things there. But when they put that one out, look what they wrote. And this was what the Sanhedrin included in the official brochure, right, that comes with the coin. And this is just one part of it, but I'll read just this short excerpt. President Trump is advancing a prophetic process that will usher in, when the time comes, the rebuilding of the third temple. It is as if he is following in the footsteps of King Cyrus, who pronounced after 70 years, 70 also being very important and related to where we're at in history right now, that Hashem, that is God, the Lord of the world, charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So, many of these rabbis are not even hiding now what it is that they expect Donald Trump to do. And of course, I know some of these rabbis. I've spoke to some of them on the phone. I've corresponded with some of them. And they don't intend on letting up. But most of this right now is behind the scene because of political pressures. Donald Trump wants to get out his Middle East peace plan of the century. There's things that they want to do first, and what they don't want to do is get a bunch of Islamic radicals or whatever trying to burn down Jerusalem, because they're going to inflame the language and say these guys are coming, they're going to destroy the Dome of the Rock, they're going to defile, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So they don't want that stuff getting out ahead of the diplomacy that certainly will be needed to try to push forward this peace plan. We've learned in just recent days that it will not include a Palestinian state, if that turns out to be true.
Things happen in cycles, and you have a chapter in your book that talks about the sort of rotational cycle of decades, and when we go back to 1897, 1917, 1947, 1967, and all of these dates of sevens,
Yes.
And you spent a lot of time talking about that. We've arrived at a moment in history.
Yeah.
It seems to be validated by the date.
Yeah. So again, what are the mystical Jews saying? They're saying that the first day of Donald Trump's in office, following the inauguration, he turned 70 years and 7 months and 7 days old. 777. This in the Hebrew calendar year 5777. They're also pointing out he's the 45th president. Of course, it's Isaiah 45, discusses Cyrus the king. So and these guys are strong believers in, we would call it biblical numerology, gematria. His name the gematria of his name is 434, I believe, which is Messiah. How do they say it? Anyway, Messiah of the house of David.
Yeah,
there you
Moshiach
go,
ben David.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now they're very clear to say this does not mean that we believe that Donald Trump is the Messiah, but rather the way they explain it is he's like a forerunner. Think of him as almost kind of like a John the Baptist, right? That is paving the way, and that when the time is right, it will lead to the coming of Messiah.
Now, are we naming dates here?
No.
Not at all. We are, in fact, striving not to place dates and facts and figures, except to say that there are trends, noticeable trends. And the fact is that behind the scenes now, for decades, the Sanhedrin, the Temple Institute, and other aligned groups, the Temple Priesthood movement, so forth, so on, have been working feverishly and developing plans. They have the plans all ready to go.
Right.
But they've maintained a low key until the Trump administration, which is just fascinating to me, no matter what you say. And we're not sitting here saying that Donald Trump will do this,
right.
or this. We're not actually trying to do predictive prophecy here. We're just observing what's happening.
We are. And again, since I wrote the book, these rabbis have become very, public.
Yes.
They're saying this stuff themselves. So whether a person would have believed it when they first read my book until today, things are changing very rapidly. And I do happen to believe that there is something to the number 70. We are in the 70th anniversary of the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Some people, read out of Psalms that a generation is 70 years, and so right. they see that connection too. Again, you go back, Cyrus the king, this was Israel under bondage to the Babylonians for 70 years until they are set free. You have Daniel the prophet in his 70 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Jesus prophesied that the second temple is going to be destroyed, and it's destroyed in 70 AD. So the stuff that is connected to Israel and to the Temple Mount in particular, somehow in the mind of God, this numerology does mean something. And of course, we know that even when the temple was built, it was very specific about length and width and, how each thing had to be laid out and built. And then some people see that in the book of Revelation, when John is ordered to measure the temple, that's actually also a reference to this end-time Great Tribulation period, also including a third temple.
We have barely had time to scratch the surface on the rabbis, Donald Trump, and the top secret plan to build the third temple. If you've ever read any of Tom Horn's books, they are absolutely packed with factual information that is documentary in nature. He's not just out there writing something that he would like to see happen. He actually documents everything that is spoken of in the book. And we need to do another program because we've just scratched the surface. What I wanted to do at this point is let you hold forth a bit on 3 other books that you have recently written. One of them is called Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eaters. What an amazing title that is. How about Saboteurs with the eye up here, and Anuit Kiptus, Foundation of a New World Order, announcing that. And then The Milieu, with a transhumanist sort of figure on the front cover. What's driving you these days? What's making you write these books that you're writing?
Yeah, well, I've never worked so hard my whole life, Gary, to retire. I keep telling my kids and everybody around me, you have to take all this stuff over. But it seems like I'll barely get to the end of something, and then like last year, this phone call, right? And it produces fruit, and it bears out that I'm being told the truth about something that at that moment, the world really doesn't know is happening. Very few people know is happening.
Wow.
You mentioned the milieu, right? Just basically French for a community.
Right.
Why did I have to write that book? Because a professor of history and theology, religion, at the Oxford University, identified me, Tom Horn, as what he called Horn's milieu, as the leader of the transhuman resistance. And by the way, you were listed in there too, right?
Goodness. Well, I'm happy to be listed there because I am in the transhumanist resistance.
Yeah.
I think it's a horrible idea.
Right.
And so do you.
And so we had to react to, why are we being listed and what is our concerns and what are our issues? And only part of it is that we do see that the transhumanist movement could be prophetic. Even Jesus as it was in the days of Noah. And you've done lots of programs talking about these illicit spirits, what they did to human genetics and animal genetics. And we see that we're now in that same area. In fact, it's actually accelerating so quickly as to be terrifying. And most people, including the people in the church, are really unaware of what is going on. We just started human CRISPR trials in the United States this month.
And that's genetic modification, folks.
Right.
It's called CRISPR, and it's scary.
Yeah. I mean, there could be something maybe that comes out of it. If they could learn how to tweak your DNA to stop cancer cells from growing without modifying what it means to be a human.
Right.
Right? But the big concern is it's like falling over a waterfall. Once you start down this path, you can't stop the fact that now we're going to go from therapy to enhancement. We can make them bigger, better, stronger, more powerful, right?
And wouldn't you love to hear Tom talk on and on and on? We're out of time, Tom, and we're going to have to do another program. That's all there is to it. The Rabbis, Donald Trump and the Third Temple, yours for a gift of $25, free shipping anywhere in the United States. Go to prophecywatchers.tv. Click on the online bookstore, scroll down, and you'll find Tom Horn's name, and you'll find the books that he writes. In particular, the Rabbis, Donald Trump, and the Third Temple. And as we always do things here, we put things in packages. And these 3 books, 4 total, yours for a gift of $75, free shipping anywhere in the United States. And you'll have a cross-section of what's happening behind the scenes through the eyes of Tom Horn, a man with an unusual spread of curiosities that leads him into dark corners where nobody else looks. And you'll be amazed at these 3 books. The Milieu, Saboteurs, and Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eaters. All 4 books, $75, free shipping anywhere in the U.S. ProphecyWatchers.tv. Tom, we're going to have to do another program.
Okay.
We've just gotten warmed up, but it's good to have you back again. It's
great to be here
after
again.
this so long an interval. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It will continue. I'm Gary Stearman. We live in fascinating times that all of us have dreamed about, and guess what? Here they are. If you know where to look, amazing things are happening. Hey, we're watching. You keep watching too. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.